The void between the twin suns of Kepler 442 stretched without end, a cathedral of silence where even light seemed reluctant to travel. Captain Vexthera stood at the heart of her vessel, the stellar dawn, watching the endless black through the layered shimmer of holographic displays. For 3 rotations, her crew had been charting this sector of space, cataloging dust clouds and errant asteroids with the quiet diligence her people were known for. It was work as ancient as exploration itself, patient, methodical, a devotion to knowledge above all things. But today, something changed. Captain, Navigator Zeflon's voice carried across the bridge, soft yet edged with urgency. His tones carried the musical resonance that defined all Zaprans, but beneath that melody was something unusual, something that made the fine crest along Vexthera's head flare with interest. "Report," she said, gliding across the deck with the fluid grace of a being designed for low gravity. Her elongated form and her 4 steady eyes gave her an air of unshakable poise. The navigator gestured toward his display. A 3-dimensional map of local space rotated above the console. Among the gray emptiness, a single red dot pulsed like a heartbeat. "An anomaly," Zeflon explained. "Artificial in composition. Approximately 12 kilometers in length. But its signatures," he hesitated, his secondary arms moving quickly over the sensor controls. "They don't match anything in our archives. Energy readings make no sense at all." Vexthera narrowed her gaze. "How old?" Zeflon's crest dipped with disbelief. "Based on radiation exposure, at least 100,000 years. Possibly more." The bridge fell silent. Even the ship itself seemed to hush. 100,000 years, the number was absurd, unfathomable. The oldest empire the galaxy remembered, the mighty Vorthan, had risen and vanished in less than 70,000. Whatever this object was, it predated memory itself. "Set course for intercept," Vexthera said, her voice calm but her heart's pounding. "Send word to the Exploration Council. Tell them this may be significant." The stellar dawn adjusted its trajectory, engines whispering as they carried the crew toward mystery. With each passing hour, the sensors revealed more, and what they found only deepened the strangeness. The object was indeed a vessel. A ship, larger than any they had ever encountered. 12 kilometers of hull stretched across the void, a silhouette of power and violence. Where most starships bore elegant curves, flowing harmonies of form and function, this one was brutal, angular, scarred by uncountable battles. Armor plating bore the pitted wounds of impacts and energy fire. Strange protrusions jutted from its surface, and everywhere there seemed to be the outlines of weapon emplacements. It was less a ship and more a fortress adrift in eternity. Science Officer Cathra's voice trembled when she spoke. "Captain. Look at the hull markings." The magnified display showed intricate carvings, not decorative but purposeful. Thousands of them, etched deep into the plating. They looked like tallies, victories, or scars worn as symbols of honor. This was not a ship that merely survived war, it celebrated it. And yet, impossibly, parts of the vessel still lived. Crystalline growths pulsed faintly across the surface, feeding on dormant power systems that should have been long dead. Against every law of entropy, the ship still whispered with life. "Minimal life support detected," Cathra reported. "Most systems in hibernation, but power still flows." "And data," Zeflon added quietly. "Massive storage banks scattered through the hull. The scale is staggering. Captain, this vessel may contain the entire knowledge of a lost civilization." Vexthera's decision was immediate. "Prepare a boarding party. Full exploration gear. Record everything." Their shuttle cut across the silence, approaching the derelict with reverence. Up close, the ancient warship loomed like a mountain of metal, dwarfing their craft, dwarfing their courage. They found a sealed airlock and worked for hours before forcing it open. Stale air gusted outward, breathable, though clearly not designed for Zephyrian lungs. Inside, the corridors stretched endlessly, designed for beings of similar stature but profoundly different intention. Every wall bore scorch marks and inscriptions. Entire sections were laboratories, weapons bays, manufacturing lines, factories of war that once fed the endless hunger of some forgotten empire. At the ship's heart, they discovered the core, a vast chamber of crystalline servers, glowing faintly with preserved data. And at the center, one console still active. Symbols scrolled across the display. The translator struggled, then found purchase. Words emerged in the Zapperian tongue. USS Eternal Vigil. Registry. Terran Federation, Deep Space Fleet. Mission Classification, Perpetual Combat Assessment and Knowledge Preservation Protocol. The words froze the crew in place. Terran Federation. A name absent from galactic memory. A species erased so completely that even rumor had forgotten them. Vexthira felt the weight of revelation settle upon her shoulders. This was no mere derelict. It was something far more dangerous, a vessel designed to enshrine the art of war itself. Humanity had built ships not only to wage war but to remember it, ships that would preserve their military knowledge even beyond extinction. For 100,000 years, this archive of violence had waited. And now, it had been found. Dr. Cathra spent the next days immersed in translation. The databases of the Eternal Vigil spilled open, revealing oceans of information. But it was not just weapons schematics and fleet records. It was analysis, obsessive, endless analysis. The humans had studied war as though it were a science deeper than physics, more inexorable than gravity. Every battle logged, every tactic dissected, every weakness catalogued. War had been their grand experiment, and they its tireless students. Captain, Cathra whispered through the comm, her voice hollow with awe and dread. You need to see this. The main archive flickered alive. Holograms filled the chamber, battles so vast they spanned entire systems, sieges that lasted centuries, ground campaigns that devoured worlds. The logs of Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison appeared. He wrote about combat not as duty, but as art. Each engagement was poetry in fire, destruction rendered elegant by precision. To Morrison, and, it seemed, to all of humanity, war was not a burden but a canvas for genius. The Zapperians watched in silence as more records unfolded. Profiles of alien minds broken by psychology, machine intelligences trapped in paradox, crystalline hives shattered by harmonic disruption. The humans had fought them all, and won. And then the discovery that chilled them most of all. Among the archives lay records of the Zapperians themselves. Battles so ancient their own histories did not recall them. Victories humanity had claimed, weaknesses meticulously catalogued. Their ancestors had faced the Terrans, and been defeated, studied, and preserved as data. Captain, Cathra said, her voice shaking, we aren't explorers studying an old wreck. We are the descendants of their test subjects. And they recorded everything. Imagine standing in that chamber, staring at the preserved knowledge of a species that turned war into its greatest achievement. Would you claim that knowledge? Or would you run, knowing it has destroyed every civilization before you? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this story has only just begun. The deeper they walked through the Eternal Vigil, the less the ship felt like a ruin and the more it felt alive, an immortal intelligence sleeping lightly, waiting for a touch to stir it from slumber. Captain Vexthira led each expedition with her usual poise, but even she felt the tremor beneath her calm. Every corridor they uncovered seemed designed not for comfort or habitation, but for discipline. Barracks lined with endless bunks spoke of lives lived in strict regimentation. Training halls still contained holographic simulators, frozen mid-battle. Even the murals etched into the walls carried one theme, repeated like a mantra: conflict is survival, survival is triumph. It was a philosophy that gnawed at her people's sensibilities. The Zapperians had risen from a long and bloody past into a culture of peace, building their society on harmony, patience, and the pursuit of knowledge. War was something they had sought to leave behind, consigning it to the dust of forgotten epochs. But here, in this ancient human warship, war was not hidden. It was glorified, studied, enshrined. "Captain," Dr. Cathra said one cycle, as she returned from another long session with the archives. Her crest sagged with exhaustion, yet her 4 eyes burned with a strange light. Vexthira looked up from the console. "What have you found?" "Patterns," Cathra said. "Not just battles and victories, but analysis that borders on prophecy. Humanity didn't just study their enemies. They studied the concept of the enemy itself. Every possible form conflict might take, biological, technological, psychological. It's as though they were preparing for an endless war against the universe itself." Vexthira frowned. Against the universe? Or against something they feared within it? The silence that followed was heavier than gravity. Meanwhile, Navigator Zeflon and his team wrestled with the technical aspects of the Terran Federation archives. "Captain," he reported, "their systems resist us. Not aggressively, yet there are firewalls, protocols, even puzzles woven into the data. It feels less like defense and more like a test. As though they expected someone, someday, to find this, and wanted to measure them." "Measure us?" Vexthira asked. Zeflon hesitated. "Yes. To see what kind of mind would seek their knowledge. To see if we are worthy, or perhaps if we are prey." The words lingered like poison. They gathered in the briefing chamber that evening. The senior officers sat around the crystalline table, its surface alive with the shifting glow of stars. But no one spoke of stars. Their thoughts were trapped within the steel walls of the eternal vigil. "This ship is a weapon, even as a relic," said Cathra. "Its archives contain strategies that could devastate entire civilizations. If released, it could reignite war across the galaxy. But it is also knowledge," Zeflon countered. "Knowledge is not inherently good or evil. It is what we do with it that matters. Imagine the protection we could give our people if we understood even a fraction of what humanity mastered." Another officer, Commander Valon, slammed a hand on the table. "Protection? Or domination? Do you not see? Whoever controls this archive controls the galaxy. That is why it must be destroyed." The debate raged. The Zephyrians had always valued consensus, but here no consensus could be reached. To destroy the archives felt like blasphemy against knowledge itself. Yet to keep them risked awakening powers no one should ever wield. And beneath it all, one question lurked, unspoken yet inescapable: what if humanity is not gone? The answer came sooner than expected. While exploring the aft sections of the warship, a team uncovered something astonishing: cryogenic pods. Thousands of them. Most were shattered or lifeless, their occupants long since claimed by time. But a handful still pulsed faintly with energy. Vexthira stared at the readouts in disbelief. "Survivors?" "Not alive," Cathra said quickly. "Not anymore. But not entirely dead, either. Suspended. Waiting. The systems are too degraded to revive them, but," she hesitated. "The technology here suggests they could have been awakened, if maintained. Humanity didn't just preserve their knowledge. They tried to preserve themselves." The bridge fell silent again. The thought was almost unbearable. The Terran Federation might have planted seeds of themselves across the stars, each one hidden, waiting. Was this the only warship, or were there others adrift in the void? The crew felt the shadow of history loom larger. They were not just explorers of a forgotten vessel. They were witnesses to a design far grander than they could comprehend. That night, Vexthira found herself alone in the data chamber, the hum of the ancient servers surrounding her like whispers from the past. She touched the console, and it responded, flickering with a new sequence of symbols. The translator processed the text, slowly, painfully. "To those who find this, we are the Terran Federation. We know extinction comes for all. But extinction is not the end. Knowledge is survival. War is eternal. We will endure, through memory, through strategy, through those who study us. If you are reading this, then you are part of the experiment. Tell us, will you fight? Or will you fall? Vexthira's hearts hammered. The message felt alive, as if written not to a distant future, but directly to her. She could not sleep. The crew felt the same unease, rippling through the ship like a fever. Conversations grew hushed, glances wary. Some officers began to argue openly. Should they transmit the discovery to the Exploration Council? Should they bury it in secrecy? Or should they use it for themselves? Zeflon confessed his fear one morning. Captain, I see it now. This is the true genius of humanity. Not their weapons, not their ships, but their ability to infect minds with the very idea of war. Even as we resist, we cannot stop thinking as they did. They have already won. Vexthira said nothing, but deep within, she knew he was right. The tension came to a breaking point when Commander Valon proposed an extreme measure. We must abandon neutrality. We must destroy the eternal vigil before its poison spreads to us. I will take responsibility. One concentrated strike to its reactors will scatter this knowledge into dust. The room erupted. Cathra protested furiously, declaring that to destroy such archives was a crime against history. Zeflon accused Valon of cowardice. The officers clashed not with weapons, but with words sharp enough to wound. Through it all, Vexthira remained silent, her mind torn. She thought of the message she had read. Tell us, will you fight, or will you fall? Perhaps this was the last and greatest weapon of humanity. The power to force every civilization that touched their legacy to wrestle with the same impossible choice. If you stood where Captain Vexthira does now, staring at the preserved legacy of a lost civilization, what would you choose? Would you destroy it, fearing its corruption? Or preserve it, hoping knowledge can be mastered? Share your choice, because the galaxy's answer may decide its future. The decision weighed upon them like the gravity of a collapsed star. The eternal vigil loomed outside the stellar dawn's viewport, a monument of metal and silence, its presence pressing against their minds as though it were alive. Captain Vexthira had delayed long enough. The debates, the arguments, the sleepless cycles, they could not go on forever. The Zephyrians had always prided themselves on their ability to reach consensus, but in the face of humanity's legacy, consensus had shattered. Some demanded preservation. Some demanded destruction. And some, like Zeflon, whispered of a third path, assimilation. To learn from the Terran Federation not in fear or reverence, but as apprentices to a master long dead. But the more they studied the archives, the more one truth became inescapable: humanity had not prepared these vessels merely to remember. They had prepared them to be found. Dr. Cathra delivered the final revelation. She summoned the officers to the archive chamber, her crest trembling, her eyes blazing with the kind of fire Zephyrians rarely allowed themselves to feel. I have translated the deepest layer, she announced. The heart of the Terran code. The holograms bloomed around them, images of stars, nebulae, fleets, battles. And then, beyond them, something else. Vast structures stretching across the void, artificial yet incomprehensible. Towers of light woven into the fabric of galaxies. Machines so immense they rivaled suns. The humans called them the architects, Cathra explained. They did not create them. They discovered them. Entities older than memory, whose purposes remain unknown. Humanity feared them, studied them, fought them. And in doing so, humanity realized something terrifying: no civilization, however vast, could survive the architects alone. Her words struck like plasma fire. That is why these archives exist, Cathra continued. Not for vanity. Not for conquest. But for survival. Humanity prepared the galaxy itself to resist the coming of the architects. These warships are seeds, planted to ensure that their strategies outlive their bodies. The chamber fell into silence. Even Valon, who had argued so fiercely for destruction, could not find words. Vexthira spoke at last. You are saying this was never about us. We were never their enemies, nor their students. We are, their heirs. Cathra bowed her head. Yes, Captain. Willing or not. The implications rippled through them like cold waves. For 100,000 years, the galaxy had been living in ignorance, believing humanity a forgotten chapter. But humanity had never truly died. They had woven themselves into the future, ensuring that their war against the architects would continue, even without them. And now, that burden pressed against Superior's shoulders. The crew fractured. Zephlon argued passionately that they must honor humanity's intent. If the architects exist, then destruction is madness. This knowledge may be the only thing standing between survival and annihilation. Commander Valon countered with fury. Or it may be the very bait that lures the architects back to us. Do you not see? We risk awakening an enemy older than creation. To carry this knowledge is to paint a target upon our species. Cathra's voice shook as she spoke. Yet ignorance is no shield. If the architects come, what defense will we have without this? The humans faced them. They survived long enough to teach us. Will we cast their gift into fire? And Vexthira listened, torn between every word, knowing there was no choice without consequence. That night, alone in the archive, she found the final message. It was hidden deep, a recording preserved with care, as though it were meant only for one who sought with enough persistence to deserve it. The figure appeared in hologram. A human officer in worn armor, his face tired but resolute. His voice was coarse, but it carried the gravity of truth. My name is Commander Jake Morrison, Terran Federation. If you are hearing this, then humanity is gone, and the burden is yours. You may hate us for what we were, for our violence, for our wars, but know this, we did not fight for power. We fought because something was coming. Something vast. Something that does not build, does not create, but consumes. The architects. We were only the first to face them. We will not be the last. You may think yourselves safe, but safety is an illusion. When they return, you will need what we have given. Not weapons alone, but understanding. Strategy. The will to resist. That is what we preserved. That is what you must now carry. Remember us not for our wars, but for why we fought them. Survive. The hologram flickered, then vanished, leaving only silence. Vexthira stood unmoving for a long time. At last, she understood. Humanity had not been erased. Humanity had chosen to become something more enduring than flesh. They had become memory, strategy, a voice echoing through eternity. When she returned to her officers, her decision was made. We cannot destroy this ship, she said softly. Nor can we keep it for ourselves. The eternal vigil must be safeguarded. Hidden, but not lost. And when the architects return, because they will return, this knowledge must be ready. Not for us, but for all who will stand against them. Some protested, others wept, but in the end, none could defy her. The choice was too heavy to carry alone, yet too important to deny. The stellar dawn departed from the Warship days later, leaving the eternal vigil in orbit around a nameless, frozen world. Cloaked, silent, preserved. As the Superiors slipped back into the stars, the archives pulsed faintly, as if aware of what had transpired. The experiment continued. Humanity's voice would not fade. In her private log, Captain Vexthira wrote. We came seeking knowledge and found a mirror. The humans are gone, but their shadow lingers, long, unyielding, filled with both terror and hope. Perhaps we will never know the full truth of the architects. Perhaps we will never be ready. But in finding this ship, we have inherited more than history. We have inherited a choice, to fear, or to fight. The humans chose to fight. And in their absence, I wonder, when the darkness comes for us, will we do the same? If you uncovered humanity's final message, that war was never their obsession, but their warning, how would you carry it? Would you safeguard their archives, destroy them, or share them with the galaxy? What choice would you make, knowing the architects may already be watching?